When you're making a movie, it's really easy and often advisable to shoot way more footage than you actually wind up needing. Whether that be additional coverage of scenes or alternate takes entirely, most of this extra footage winds up on the cutting room floor, never to be seen. Deleted scenes are part of making movies. Every single one has something cut out, including Marvel films such as Avengers Endgame. And sometimes these deleted scenes have some pretty serious implications. At least they would if they would have made it into the final film. So let's take a look at some of the deleted scenes for Avengers Endgame and how they would have not only changed the final film, but possibly the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. Including how one of those scenes could imply that the Mad Titan himself, Thanos, is still alive. So sit back, commune with the Ancient One, and let us break these scenes down for you.
I see this as an absolute win.
Now there is some absolutely bonkers stuff that doesn't make it onto the screen as part of the final films within the MCU. And yes, sometimes we do get to see these deleted scenes when movies come out on Blu-ray. But other times these scenes just get thrown into the vault, never to be seen again. And that was largely the case for a lot of stuff from Avengers Endgame. Since this film may very well be the most ambitious thing to ever be committed to celluloid, there was naturally a lot of leftover stuff. And yeah, we got some small things on the Blu-ray, but nothing that earth-shattering. However, with the release of the Fancy Pants Infinity Saga 4K Blu-ray box set, we got a lot of new scenes that couldn't be seen anywhere else. And man, there is some crazy stuff in there. However, a lot of you probably can't afford the $550 box set. Can't really blame you there, as we know that we certainly can't. Luckily enough for us poor schlubs though, there is Disney+. On Disney's new streaming platform, alongside Endgame, you can actually watch a few of these cut segments with commentary from the directors, Anthony and Joe Russo. That's those two down in the bottom left corner. Sure, it's not the scenes by themselves, but if you're able to tune out what the Russos are saying, you can watch the scenes at least. Might not always make out what's being said, but you can watch. Let's start off with the one that had people the most intrigued when we heard about it a while back. The scene in which Tony goes into the Soul World, or the Way Station as it was referred to by the directors, after snapping his fingers, and gets to talk to an adult version of his daughter Morgan, here portrayed by 13 Reasons Why actress Katherine Langford. Now, this particular scene, seen here in a very rough form, peeped the obvious keying issues around Morgan's hair. That's definitely a rough pass. It was cut for a couple of reasons. First was pacing, as this segment, while touching, really ground the film to a bit of a halt, which is to be expected when you have a major event, such as Stark sacrificing himself to save the universe, getting interrupted right in the middle by a dialogue sequence. It's a bit jarring energy-wise. Second reason comes down to the redundancy of the moment. See, the purpose of this scene was for Stark to come to terms with what he had done, so that he could be at peace in the end. One problem though, that same sort of sentiment was achieved by Stark's own self-eulogy that we saw at the end of the film. That established that he had accepted the possibility that this could be the end, and he was fine with that. So he didn't need to have this moment with his daughter to do that. And when given the choice between this and the self-eulogy, the directors went with the latter. Largely due to the fact that audiences may not have been able to connect with the adult Morgan at all, due to her not having been seen at any point in the film before this scene. Now, what could this scene have changed about the final film or the future going forward? Honestly, not a ton. As we stated earlier, this basically filled the same purpose as the Stark hologram at the end, so swapping that out for this would have served the same end. And since we had already seen the Way Station in Infinity War with Thanos, there wasn't really any big reveal there. We guess it could have set up Katherine Langford as the future version of Morgan, perhaps for an appearance down the road in Young Avengers or something like that maybe. Beyond that, not really a big impact. Next up though is two scenes that are actually alternate versions of the interaction between Hulk and the Ancient One in 2012. In the final version of the film, we see the Ancient One actually knock the astral form of Bruce Banner out of the Hulk body, so that she could interact with a more normal form of him. However, in the original version, this doesn't happen, and instead she speaks with him as Smart Hulk. Once again, the effects here are rough, or in some cases not even touched, due to the sequence getting reshot, negating the need to polish things up here. It's always kind of fun to see how things look before all of the visual effects wizards get to work on a piece. It also makes us wonder if those motion capture suits are all that comfortable. The big bit of info that we get in this sequence that could have a major impact on the future of the MCU comes when the Ancient One talks about how the stones don't take people out in the traditional sense, but rather forces them to just not exist anymore. She states that death is final, but the snap is not, which explains why the stones were able to bring everyone who was blipped back at the end of the film, but not someone like Black Widow, which we'll get to her in a little bit. Interestingly, this is actually the first and really only time that the snap itself was really explained in any way, and it sets up an interesting possibility for the future, the possibility of Thanos returning. Now, in the current state of the MCU post-Endgame, the stones are gone, having been put back in their proper places in the timeline, and the stones belonging to the main timeline having been destroyed by Thanos Prime. It is possible, however, that some unknown being might figure out a way to undo the effects of Stark's snap without them, effectively reversing the dusting of Thanos 2014. This could potentially mean that Thanos could be making a return in a future phase of the MCU. While probably not advisable to do in Phase 4 or even Phase 5, Thanos is a popular enough villain, usually listed as one of, if not the best villain in the entirety of the MCU, so having him make a comeback in the future might not be such a bad idea. As we said though, probably not a great idea to do it so soon. Finally, we're going to talk about a scene that actually isn't on Disney+, so it's a bit harder to track down any good footage of it. We are of course talking about the alternate Boromir scene. Before we do that though, can you do us a favor and click on the subscribe button and ring the bell thingy-mabob? It'd take you about 1 second to do so, and it would really help us keep the lights on around here. Anyways, as we said, it's hard to get good footage of it. So do us a favor and don't mind the quality here. It's really the best that we can do without shelling out ridiculous amounts of money that we just don't have. Anyways, this sequence is an alternate version of Black Widow's sacrifice on Boromir in order to obtain the Soul Stone. In the final film, Black Widow and Hawkeye fight briefly over who gets to be the one to take a swan dive off of the cliff, which ultimately ends with Black Widow laying at the bottom of the cliff and Hawkeye with stone in hand. However, in the original version, they don't fight each other, but rather engage in a fight with Thanos and his soldiers, and it doesn't go well. Black Widow makes a break for the edge of the cliff and is struck numerous times by blaster fire, ultimately managing to literally crawl her way, mortally wounded, to the edge and throw herself off. As expected, the moment ends just as it did in the original, with Hawkeye being whisked away down the mountain along with the stone. Now the differences between these two different versions are pretty large actually. Obviously they are both dramatic, but the one used in the final film is a much more personal moment. While Black Widow and Hawkeye do get to have an emotional beat in the original, more action-packed version, it's shorter and not as much of a focus. So it's understandable why this scene would be reshot. The final version puts all of its weight behind the relationship and uses the sacrifice to really get at the heart of that. Now, in regards to how this moment could have affected the future of the MCU if it was used instead, there really isn't a ton to talk about. Could touch upon the idea that would mean that past Thanos knew about Boromir in 2014, at least he would have after that moment. So if he hadn't come forward in time after the stone was returned, he could have just gotten it himself, which would have been pretty bad. So like the first scene that we talked about, it would have really just been a replacement that served the same relative purpose. And that is that. Hey, wait a minute, ScreenRant guy. What about the In the Trenches deleted scene? Oh, that one? The other deleted scene on Disney+? You know, originally we weren't planning on talking about that one in this video, because honestly, while it's really cool, it's not really that earth-shattering. But since we know the comment section wouldn't be too happy with us if we didn't, here we go. This scene, that was meant to take place during the final battle, saw pretty much our entire cast of heroes, ranging from the Avengers to the Guardians to all of the other free agent heroes, chilling in one of those fancy pocket dimension things that Doctor Strange can create, talking about their plan to get the stones back to the past. It is awesome to see all of the heroes interacting like this, and makes for some really humorous moments. However, this scene was ultimately cut due to how the moment sort of slowed down the pacing of this big epic battle scene. Once again, it's kinda weird to have a dialogue scene shoved directly into the middle of a major action sequence. A lot of the individual character moments here were broken out though and scattered throughout the rest of the sequence, such as Stark hugging Peter Parker, Star-Lord seeing Gamora again, and Stark talking with Doctor Strange. All in all though, seeing these deleted scenes is pretty freaking cool. While most of them may not have really amounted to any major differences, it's still nice to see what could have been, and how things could have gone if they were kept in Avengers Endgame. And that is just a handful of the deleted scenes from the film that could have had big impacts on the film and the future of the franchise. What did you think of these scenes? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below, and while you're down there, why not consider subscribing to ScreenRant? Ring the bell too while you're at it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the movies.